The red suns were setting over the wide plains of planet Vora. Their light touched the mountains and made the metal tents of the warrior camp shine like fire. But inside the camp there was silence. No drums, no songs, no laughter. The week of the mating circle had come, yet no one stepped forward. The strongest female warriors stood aside, pretending to polish their weapons, and the males stayed in their training fields, hitting targets just to avoid each other's eyes. The great circle of stones that once held dances and promises stood empty, and even the wind seemed tired of waiting. Commander Liara walked through the quiet paths of the camp. Her armor was heavy, marked with the scars of many battles, and her long braids swung behind her like a whip. She had been trained never to show weakness, but the silence bothered her. Her people had always been proud and fearless, yet fear now lived in their hearts. It was not fear of death. It was fear of shame. They had lost the last battle, lost to humans. To them, humans were supposed to be weak, fragile, slow. But those small creatures had fought like storms, and their courage had broken the alien army's pride. Liara had survived that battle, but not because of her strength. She remembered it clearly. Her squad was surrounded by fire, her leg was crushed under a broken tank, and she was sure death was near. Then a human soldier ran into the flames and lifted the wreck from her body. His uniform was torn, his skin burned, but his eyes were calm. He carried her out of the battlefield without a word. She never even learned his name. After that day, she could not forget his face. Every night when she closed her eyes, she saw those human eyes again, tired, brave, and kind. Now, walking through the camp, she wondered why the memory still lived inside her. She was a warrior, not a dreamer. She should be thinking about her troops, not a human. She stopped near the great bonfire pit where flames usually danced high during the mating circle week. It was cold and empty now. Liara sighed softly. Around her, the night grew darker and the wind carried the smell of iron and sand. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled. The war was over, but peace felt heavier than battle. A young warrior came running toward her, bowing deeply. "Commander, the elders ask if the ceremony should be delayed again." Liara looked at the empty circle, then at the stars above. "No," she said quietly. "Let it be as it is. If no one comes, let the silence speak for us." The young warrior nodded and left. Liara sat by the cold fire pit. Her armor clicked softly as she removed her helmet and placed it beside her. Without it, her face looked younger, gentler, though her golden eyes still burned with pride. She looked at her hands, the same hands that had held a sword since childhood, and felt strange. For the first time they trembled slightly, not from fear but from confusion. She whispered to herself, "Why did he save me? Why would a human risk his life for someone who was his enemy?" There was no answer, only the wind. The stars were bright, and somewhere out there, maybe that same human soldier was looking at them too. The thought made her chest feel warm and heavy at the same time. Across the camp, she heard two soldiers talking in low voices. "The humans fight with madness," one said. "They don't stop even when wounded. Maybe that's why no one wants to mate this week. Who can feel proud after being beaten by such creatures?" Liara listened quietly. Their words stung, but they were true. Her people's pride was broken. The mating circle had always been a symbol of strength. Warriors chose partners to continue the bloodline of courage, but now, after losing to humans, everyone felt unworthy. No one wanted to show weakness by seeking a mate. She closed her eyes and remembered again the human's face. His calmness in chaos, his voice that said only one thing before carrying her out. "You're not dying today." Those words had stayed with her. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not as a commander, not as an enemy, but as a person. Hours passed. The camp lights dimmed and the moons rose. Liara sat alone beside the fire pit, the silence around her deep as the void. For the first time in her life, she felt lonely. Her rank, her medals, her victories, none of them filled that emptiness. She thought of her people, of their silence, of the cold nights without music. She thought of peace and how it felt like a wound that never healed. A soft breeze moved through the camp, carrying dust and faint voices from the guards. Somewhere a beast howled in the mountains. Liara looked toward the horizon, where the land met the stars. For a heartbeat, she imagined she saw a shadow moving, a tall figure walking alone, carrying light on his shoulder. She blinked and the vision vanished. Maybe it was just her mind, tired from too many nights awake. Or maybe fate was moving toward her again, step by step, across the endless desert between two worlds. She stood up slowly, put her helmet back on, and looked at the empty circle one last time. "Next week will be different," she said quietly, though she didn't know why she believed it. Something in her heart told her that the silence would soon end, that something, or someone, was coming to break it. And for the first time since the war ended, Commander Liara felt the smallest spark of hope. The next sunrise came with a strange stillness over the alien camp. The two suns rose slowly behind the rocky hills, painting the sky orange and gold. The warriors woke and began their morning drills. Metal clanged, dust rose, and their voices echoed through the valley. But there was no energy in their movements. Even their swords sounded dull. The spirit of the camp was broken, and no one knew how to bring it back. Commander Liara watched them from a high platform, her golden eyes sharp but tired. She wanted to speak to them, to remind them who they were, yet her own heart was unsure. As she looked over the camp, a small alert sound came from the watchtower. One of the guards shouted, "A figure is approaching from the western dunes." Instantly, all warriors turned. The wind carried sand across the plain, and through it, a single shadow walked toward them. The figure moved slowly but with purpose, not afraid of the watchtowers or the armed soldiers waiting. Liara narrowed her eyes. The scanners hummed, trying to identify the intruder. The result flashed on the display. Her breath caught for a moment. The reading said, "Human, unarmed, alone." The camp became tense. The aliens whispered among themselves. "A human? Here? Is this some trick? Maybe a spy?" Liara raised her hand for silence. She watched as the figure came closer, step by step, until he was standing before the camp gates. His face was covered with dust, his armor was scratched, and he carried a white flag made from torn fabric, tied to a broken spear. His uniform was old but neat, and his eyes, clear and calm, met hers without fear. "I am Sergeant Ethan Cross," the human said, his voice steady though his body looked tired from travel. "I come under peace orders from Earth Command. I request to meet your leader." The guards pointed their plasma rifles at him. "You stand before our commander," one shouted. "State your purpose or leave this world." Liara stepped forward, her long cape moving in the wind. Her voice was cold but curious. "You stand on Worrier ground, human. This camp remembers your kind's fire. Why should I not order your capture right now?" Ethan looked at her directly. "Because I came not for war but to end it forever." His words silenced everyone. Even the guards lowered their rifles slightly. Liara studied him for a long time. His face was marked with old wounds, his eyes deep with weariness, but there was something honest in his tone. She gave a small nod. "Let him in," she ordered. The gate opened with a deep metallic sound, and the human soldier stepped into the alien camp. The warriors followed him with their eyes, whispering. Some looked angry, others confused, but no one dared to challenge Liara's decision. She led Ethan through the camp. As they walked, he saw alien children training with small staffs, workers fixing energy shields, and beasts pulling supply carts. It was a world both strange and beautiful. He noticed that despite their strength, there was sadness in every face. The air felt heavy, full of memories of defeat and doubt. They reached the command tent. Inside, the room was wide, filled with glowing screens, ancient weapons, and the flag of the Worrier Legion. Liara faced him. "Speak, human. What peace can exist between blood enemies?" Ethan took a deep breath. "The war has taken too much from both sides. My commanders and I believe it's time for a real alliance, humans and Worrier, together. We have common enemies beyond this galaxy. You are warriors. We are survivors. If we fight side by side, no force in the stars could break us. Liara said nothing for a moment. Her expression stayed calm, but her mind was filled with memories. His words echoed in her chest like distant thunder. Finally, she asked, "And why you? Why come alone into a camp that hates you?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because someone once told me that real courage means walking unarmed into fear, and because there's something I needed to say. To you." Liara frowned slightly. "To me? You do not know me, human." "I do," Ethan said softly. "You were the commander trapped under the burning crawler during the siege of Terran Field. I was there, I pulled you out. You never looked back, but I never forgot your eyes." Her breath stopped for a heartbeat. She remembered that night, the fire, the pain, and the voice that said, "You're not dying today." It was him. The same calm tone, the same eyes. She looked away quickly, not wanting the others to see her surprise. "You saved me out of duty," she said. "Nothing more." "Maybe," he replied, "but it changed me. After that day, I knew this war was wrong. If enemies can save each other, maybe they were never enemies at all." His words cut through the air like a quiet storm. Liara felt something stir inside her, a feeling she didn't want to name. The tent was silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "You speak brave words for a soldier, but peace is not made by words." "I know," Ethan said. "That's why I'm here to prove them." Outside, the suns had climbed high, and the camp was watching. The human's presence spread whispers through every tent. Some called him fool, others called him hero. But one thing was certain. After many dark weeks, something had finally changed. The silence was broken. Liara walked out of the tent first, her armor shining under the light. She turned to him once more and said quietly, "You will stay. But understand this, human, every eye here watches you. One wrong step and even I cannot protect you." Ethan nodded. "Then I'll give them no reason to fear me." The wind blew between them, carrying dust and promise. Somewhere in the distance, the great beasts howled again, as if the world itself felt that a new chapter had just begun. The next day began with an uneasy silence in the camp. The alien warriors were still not sure what to think about the human who now walked among them. Some glared at him from a distance, others followed him with quiet suspicion. Ethan moved calmly, never reacting to their whispers. He spent the morning helping a group of soldiers repair a damaged transport carrier. When one of the machines jammed, he removed his gloves and used his bare hands to fix the small energy coils. The alien stared. No one expected a human to know how to repair Vora technology, yet he worked with care and confidence, his hands steady, his mind focused. Commander Liara watched him from a distance. She stood beside the training field, arms crossed, pretending to inspect the drills, but her golden eyes followed Ethan's every move. Something about him disturbed her calm. He was not afraid, not even surrounded by those who could crush him in seconds. There was strength in his stillness, a quiet kind of power she couldn't explain. When their eyes met, just for a second, she felt something strange, like the echo of that night he had saved her. She quickly turned away. Later that afternoon, the camp elders gathered around the great fire circle to decide what to do about the human visitor. They were old warriors, their skin marked by battle scars and their voices heavy with pride. One of them, Elder Varen, struck the ground with his staff and said, "This human walks among us as if he belongs. It is an insult. He should be sent away before he brings more shame." Another elder replied, but Commander Liara allowed him to stay. "We cannot go against her word," Varen growled. "Then she must test him. Let him face the trial of honor. If he survives, he may stay. If not, the sands will take him." The council agreed. The trial of honor was an ancient test meant to prove a warrior's courage. It was not about strength or weapons, but about spirit. Few had passed it. Liara knew the risk, yet deep inside she wanted to see what this human was truly made of. When the meeting ended, she walked to the training ground where Ethan was teaching a group of young warriors how to reinforce their armor joints. "Human," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "The elders have decided. If you wish to stay in this camp, you must prove yourself in the trial of honor." Ethan stood and looked at her. "I accept." "You don't even know what it is," she said, surprised by how fast he agreed. He smiled lightly. "If I'm to fight beside your people, I should understand what gives them strength." "A test seems like the right way." Liara stared at him for a long moment. There was no fear in his eyes, only quiet certainty. So be it, she said and turned away. At sunrise, the trial begins. The next morning, the whole camp gathered near the ancient arena carved into the desert rock. The trial of honor had 3 stages, each meant to test courage, will, and heart. The warriors stood around in a wide circle, their voices whispering like wind through metal. The ground shimmered with heat, and in the center stood Ethan, dressed only in a light suit. Liara watched from a high platform, her face hidden behind her helmet. The first trial was the Walk of Fire. Ethan had to cross a long path of burning sand that could melt armor. The heat waves danced around him and every step burned. The crowd murmured. No human could survive that. But Ethan walked slowly, breathing through the pain. He thought of his fallen comrades, of the soldiers who had trusted him, and he kept moving. His boots began to smoke, his breath turned heavy, but he did not stop. When he finally reached the other side, the crowd fell silent. His skin was red, his uniform scorched, but his eyes were calm. The second trial began soon after. He was thrown into the eye of storm, a circular field surrounded by energy pillars that created violent lightning bursts. The test was meant to measure a warrior's reaction and focus. Ethan closed his eyes and waited. When the lightning struck, he moved not to fight it, but to flow with it. His steps were precise, his timing perfect, as if he could sense where the next bolt would fall. The audience gasped. Even Liara leaned forward, unable to look away. The storm ended, and Ethan stood untouched, his breathing steady. Then came the final trial, the meeting of the beast. A great creature called Torgon was released into the arena. Its massive body was covered in dark scales, its eyes burning like molten stone. It roared, shaking the ground. Ethan had no weapon, no shield. The warriors cheered for the beast, expecting to see the human crushed in seconds. But Ethan didn't run. He stood still, waiting as the beast charged toward him. Dust rose, claws scraped the stone, and when the creature reached him, Ethan did something that no one had ever done before. He lifted his hand and placed it on the beast's chest. For a long moment, everything was silent. The beast's breathing slowed. Its eyes met Ethan's, and then slowly the creature bowed its head. The arena was completely still. The human's calm had broken a beast that no alien could ever tame. Liara's heart pounded in her chest. She could not explain what she had just seen. The crowd began to murmur in disbelief, then cheer, the sound echoing across the desert. Ethan stepped back quietly, his body tired, his eyes lifted toward the platform where Liara stood. Their gazes met again, and something unspoken passed between them, something strong, something real. When the trial ended, Liara walked down to him. The crowd bowed as she approached. She stopped before him, her face serious but her voice soft. "You have done what no outsider has ever done," she said. "You have our respect," Ethan nodded gently. "Respect is all I came for." Liara looked at him for a long moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. Yet deep inside her, something new had begun to grow, something warmer than pride and more dangerous than fear. "The N I tried," Ethan replied with a small smile. "But the stars here are too bright for sleep." Liara stopped beside him and looked out over the valley. "The stars on this side of the galaxy burn closer to the surface," she said. "Our ancestors believed they were the eyes of fallen warriors watching over us. Then they must be watching proudly tonight," Ethan said quietly. Liara didn't answer. For a long moment, they both stood in silence, listening to the wind. Then she said, "You surprised everyone, even me. No human was ever meant to pass the trial of honor. Yet you did." "I didn't want to prove I was stronger," Ethan said. "I just wanted to show that I respect your people, that I want peace." Liara turned to look at him. The firelight from the camp reached just far enough to touch his face. His eyes were calm and steady, the same eyes she had seen in battle. There was no arrogance, no fear, only truth. It was strange for her to look at someone and not feel the need to guard herself. "You risked your life for peace," she said. "But why risk it for me that day on Terran Field? You could have left me there." Ethan's expression grew thoughtful. "I didn't see an enemy. I saw someone trapped in fire, the same as any soldier. Sometimes saving one life means more than destroying 100. Her heart tightened at his words. No alien, no warrior had ever spoken to her like that. Among her people, compassion was seen as weakness, yet this human wore it like armor. She looked away, unsure of what to say. The silence stretched between them, deep and strange. Finally, Ethan spoke again. You know, when I was a kid, my father used to say that bravery isn't about fighting harder, it's about caring when others stop caring. I think he'd like you. Liara almost smiled. Your father sounds wise. He was, Ethan said softly. He taught me that enemies are just people we haven't understood yet. They stood there watching the moons slowly drift above the horizon. The night felt lighter, calmer. Liara felt a warmth spreading through her chest. She wanted to say something to thank him, but her voice failed. The commander who could command armies could not command her own heart. When the wind grew stronger, she finally said, "The camp will not forget what you did today. You earned their respect and mine." Ethan turned to her. "Respect means a lot coming from you." Liara hesitated for a second before replying. "It's rare for me to give it. Rarer still for me to feel uncertain." Ethan didn't press her. He just nodded and said, "Uncertainty is where change begins." They both looked back toward the fire. The flames were lower now, only a few embers glowing in the distance. The sounds of the camp were fading into soft murmurs. Liara knew she should leave, but her feet didn't move. She wanted to stay a little longer beside this strange human who spoke with such quiet courage. Ethan finally broke the silence again. "Commander Liara," he said, "if peace ever truly comes, what will you do?" She thought for a long time. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have lived only for war. I was raised to fight, not to dream. Maybe I will learn what peace feels like. Then maybe I can show you," Ethan said softly, almost to himself. Liara turned to him, her golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then she looked away quickly and said, "You talk too much, human." But her voice held a small trace of laughter, the first he had ever heard from her. Ethan smiled. "Maybe, but sometimes words can heal faster than weapons." She didn't answer, yet she didn't walk away either. The two of them stood together until the stars dimmed, and the first light of dawn touched the camp. Something unspoken had formed between them that night, a connection neither of them could deny. And though they didn't say it aloud, both knew the war inside their hearts had already begun to change. The suns rose again over the Red Valley, and the warrior camp woke to a new rhythm. For the first time in many moons, the sounds of laughter and training mixed together. The warriors no longer carried the same bitterness. The humans' courage during the trial had lit something inside them, a forgotten spark of pride. Ethan walked among them, helping wherever he could. He repaired shields, treated wounded beasts, and shared stories of Earth soldiers. At first, many only listened out of curiosity, but soon his words began to inspire them. The aliens who once mocked him now called him by name. Commander Liara watched all of this quietly. She saw how quickly her people had accepted him, how easily he had done what speeches and threats never could. The human's presence had changed everything. Yet what disturbed her most was how much it had changed her. Every time she saw him, her heart felt both heavy and calm at the same time. She didn't understand it, but she didn't fight it anymore. That evening, as the second sun began to fall behind the cliffs, Liara called a meeting with her council. The elders gathered in the command tent, their armor gleaming under the red light. Elder Varen spoke first, his voice full of authority. "Commander, the human has stayed long enough. We cannot forget who his people are. If the Council of Worlds learns that we shelter a human soldier, they will question our loyalty." Liara looked at him without fear. "Then let them question it. The war is over, and this man has earned his place among us." Varen frowned. "He may have impressed the young ones, but trust between our kinds is dangerous. The humans are clever. Today he fixes our shields. Tomorrow he might learn our weaknesses." Liara's voice turned sharp. "He saved my life. He saved our honor. If I cannot trust the one who risked himself for peace, then who can I trust?" The tent went quiet. The elders looked at one another, unsure how to answer. Finally, Varen bowed slightly and said, "Then the choice is yours, Commander, but understand. If he stays, you take full responsibility for his life and his actions." "I accept that," Liara said firmly. "He stays." When the meeting ended, Liara stepped outside and found Ethan standing near the training field. He was helping a young warrior adjust the targeting scope of a plasma bow. The boy laughed when the arrow hit the mark. Ethan smiled, patting his shoulder. It was a simple human gesture, but it carried warmth that the Vora rarely showed to one another. Liara walked toward him. "You have been busy," she said. Ethan turned and gave a small grin. Just trying to make myself useful. Your warriors learn fast. They learn because you make them believe they can, she replied quietly. That is something they forgot long ago. He wiped the dust from his hands. Belief is the first weapon any soldier needs. Without it, even the strongest armor fails. Liara looked at him thoughtfully. The more she spoke with him, the more she realized how strange and simple humans were. They fought not just with power, but with heart. She found it both confusing and beautiful. As the day faded, Ethan and Liara walked together toward the edge of the camp where the windmills turned slowly against the golden horizon. The air was cool and the twin suns were sinking behind the rocks. Ethan stopped and looked out across the valley. You know, he said softly, your world is not that different from mine. The colors, the sky, the silence, it reminds me of the deserts back home. Liara followed his gaze. On your world, do warriors also live in camps like this? Sometimes, he said. But on Earth, most of us dream of leaving the camps behind. We fight so one day no one has to. She was quiet for a moment. That is a dream my people never had. We fight because it is all we know. Then maybe, Ethan said, it's time someone taught you another way. Liara turned to him, her golden eyes meeting his. The wind blew through her hair, carrying the faint scent of metal and sand. And who will teach us? She asked softly. Ethan hesitated, then smiled. Maybe I can try. For a long time they stood without speaking. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of something deep and unspoken. Liara could feel her pulse quicken. Her heart, trained to stay hard in every battle, was now uncertain. She stepped closer, the distance between them fading until she could see the tired lines on his face. Human, she said in a low voice. You risked your life for a people that once tried to kill you. You faced our trials without fear. You brought peace where there was none. Tell me truly why. Ethan looked at her carefully. Because peace doesn't start between nations. It starts between two people who stop seeing each other as enemies. Liara's breath caught. She had no answer for that. His words felt too honest, too close to something her heart had long forgotten. She turned her eyes away. You speak as if you understand us. Maybe not all of you, Ethan said, but I'm trying to understand one. Liara met his eyes again, and this time she didn't look away. The air between them felt alive, heavy with emotion neither wanted to name. Before she could respond, a sudden horn echoed from the watchtower. The guards shouted from above. Scouts returning. Incoming dust storm from the west. Liara straightened at once, her commander's instincts returning. Gather everyone inside the shield domes, she ordered. The warriors moved quickly, covering the beasts and securing equipment. Ethan followed her lead, helping to lock down the supply gates. The storm rolled across the valley like a wall of red fire, swallowing the horizon. When the first wave of dust hit, Liara and Ethan ducked into a shelter together. The air was filled with roaring wind and sand beating against the metal walls. Inside it was dark except for the soft light from a single glowing lamp. They sat side by side, breathing hard from the rush. Outside, the storm screamed like a living thing, but inside there was stillness. Liara turned her head and looked at Ethan. He met her gaze, calm and steady as always. For the first time, she felt no distance between them, only the quio fragile and yet so unbreakable. Ethan noticed her gaze but didn't speak right away. After a moment, he said softly, I've seen storms like this before. On Mars Station during my early missions. The red dust looked just like this, but the silence afterward was always beautiful. Liara turned to him. You speak of beauty even while trapped inside destruction. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's how we survive. We keep finding beauty, even when everything else burns. She looked away, pretending to ignore the warmth his words brought. The storm outside grew louder, shaking the metal panels above them. A few sparks flew from the lamp and the shelter went dark for a few seconds before the emergency light turned on again. Its soft glow bathed the space in pale gold. Liara's voice was quieter now. You said you came for peace. But peace is not given, it must be earned. You have done much, human. But what happens when your people return? Will they accept this alliance? Ethan sighed. Some will, some won't. But I didn't come here because they sent me. I came because I believe it's right. The universe won't change unless someone takes the first step. Liara looked at him with slow surprise. You disobeyed your own command? I followed my conscience, he said simply. Sometimes that's harder than following orders. She didn't answer right away. Her world was built on obedience. Honor meant loyalty above all. Yet here was a man who stood alone against his own side for something he believed in. It was the kind of courage her people rarely understood. As the hours passed, the wind began to weaken. The storm's fury slowly faded into a long, low whisper. Liara stood and checked the metal door. "It's easing," she said. "When it clears, we'll check for damage." Ethan nodded but stayed seated. He looked around the shelter and said quietly, "I used to think strength was only about winning battles, but I've learned it's also about protecting what's worth keeping." Liara turned back toward him. "And what do you think is worth keeping?" He met her gaze. "This what we've built here. The peace, your people's courage, and you." Her heart skipped. She wasn't sure she heard him right. "Me?" she asked, her voice softer than she meant it to be. Ethan nodded. "When I first saw you on the battlefield, I saw someone who didn't need saving, but I couldn't let you die. Maybe I didn't understand why then. Now I think I do. You remind me of everything strong and good about this galaxy." Liara's throat tightened. She was used to praise for her strength, for her victories, but no one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen beyond the armor. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Humans speak with strange hearts. You fight your wars with feelings." Ethan smiled softly. "Maybe that's why we survive them." The silence between them grew deeper, softer, filled with something they both felt but didn't name. Outside, the storm had nearly ended. Only the sound of wind brushing over sand remained. Liara walked to the door and pressed the control panel. It opened slowly, revealing a world washed clean by the storm. The air shimmered under G themselves. The human worked like one of them. No pride, no command, only effort. When the day ended, Liara called him to her tent. "You have done enough for today," she said. "Rest, you are not one of my soldiers." He wiped his hands and smiled. "Maybe not, but I fight beside them." Her eyes softened. "You speak as if you already belong here." "Maybe I do," he said quietly. "But that depends on you." Liara's heart beat faster. She wanted to stay silent, to keep her composure, but the words came before she could stop them. "You are unlike any creature I have met, human. You do not command with fear or pride. You lead by heart." He stepped closer, stopping only when he was an arm's length away. "And you, Commander Liara, lead by honor and strength. But you also have a heart, even if you try to hide it." She looked away quickly, but he could see the faint color rising in her face. "You should not speak to your commander like that," she said, though her tone lacked real anger. Ethan smiled softly. "Then maybe one day I won't have to." Their eyes met again, and for a moment time stood still. The air between them felt alive, full of words they dared not say. Then Liara turned and walked to the tent entrance. "Tomorrow we discuss alliance terms with Earth Command," she said quietly. "Be ready," Ethan nodded. "Always." As he left, Liara placed her hand over her heart and whispered to herself, "What are you doing?" Ethan stood near the communication tower, speaking with the engineers as they tried to reconnect with Earth Command. His uniform was dusty, but his eyes were bright. When Liara arrived, he turned and saluted out of habit. She shook her head slightly. "You are not my soldier, human. You do not need to salute." "Force of habit," he said with a smile. She looked at the open sky above. "Today we speak with your leaders. If peace is truly what they want, then let it begin here." The signal connected after several tries, and a holographic image of the Earth General appeared. His uniform was neat, his expression firm. "Sergeant Cross, report your status." Ethan stood straight. "Sir, I've established contact with the Worrier camp. Commander Liara and her people are ready to discuss peace and possible alliance terms." The general's eyes narrowed. "Alliance? We asked for negotiation, not partnership." Liara stepped forward, her tall figure casting a shadow across the console. "If you come to take, not to share, then this talk ends now." Her voice carried the weight of command, calm but powerful. The general hesitated. "Commander, the human race respects your strength, but trust takes time. Your people fought fiercely against us." Liara's gaze was steady. "And yet it was your soldier who proved that honor still exists among humans. We have no interest in war anymore. But if we build peace, it must be as equals." The general looked at Ethan. "You've gone far beyond your orders, Sergeant." Ethan met his eyes. "Yes, sir, but I believe it's the right thing to do." There was a long pause. Then the general exhaled slowly. "Very well. Earth Command will send envoys within 2 cycles. You'll oversee the first stage of cooperation. The transmission ended, leaving silence behind. Liara turned to Ethan. You defied your own leaders again. He shrugged lightly. Maybe. But peace won't happen if we wait for orders. Liara studied him for a moment and then said softly, You are the most reckless creature I have ever met. And yet, you let me stay, he said, smiling. She turned away to hide the small curve of her lips. Perhaps I made a mistake. No, he said quietly. You made a choice. The rest of the day passed in preparation. The warriors cleaned the camp and repaired the great circle of stones where their ancestors once gathered. The mating circle that had been empty for so long was now alive with light. It was tradition that whenever peace was declared, all warriors, male and female, stood within that circle as a sign of unity. That night torches burned high, and the air was filled with the sound of music and voices. Ethan stood near the fire watching the aliens celebrate. He had seen many victories in his life, but none felt like this. This was not about winning, it was about healing. Liara stood at the center, dressed in ceremonial armor, her hair tied with silver threads. The crowd quieted when she raised her hand. Warriors of Vora, she said, her voice echoing through the valley. Tonight, we honor not victory but peace. We honor courage that knows no species. And we honor one who reminded us what it means to fight for more than pride. Her eyes found Ethan. Step forward, human. Ethan hesitated, surprised, but walked into the circle. The crowd parted as he passed, their golden eyes following him. He stopped in front of her. Liara removed her armored gloves and looked at him without speaking for a moment. The firelight danced between them. You came to our world unarmed, she said softly, and faced fire, storm, and beast. You changed my people. You changed me. For that I owe you more than words. Ethan nodded slowly. You owe me nothing. We both just did what we had to. Liara shook her head slightly. No, this is more than duty. She took a deep breath and said, Among my people, when a warrior proves their soul to another, they may ask for a bond, a union of trust and life. Tonight I ask you, Ethan of Earth, will you stand beside me? Not as enemy, not as guest, but as my mate. The crowd gasped. Silence filled the air. No human had ever been given such an honor. Ethan looked at her, his heart pounding. For a moment he could not speak. He saw the strength in her eyes, the same fire that had drawn him from the first moment he saw her. He stepped closer and said quietly, Liara of Vora, I came here for peace, but I found something greater. I will stand with you always. The crowd erupted in cheers that shook the night. The drums began to beat, slow and strong, like the sound of two hearts joining. Liara smiled for the first time in front of her people. A true smile, bright and unguarded. She took Ethan's hand and lifted it high. Then let this night mark a new age, she said. The age where human and Vora walk together. The warriors shouted her name and his together, their voices rising into the stars. Later, as the fire dimmed and the crowd began to rest, Ethan and Liara stood on the cliff overlooking the valley. The sky above them was full of stars, brighter than ever. Liara looked at him and said softly, You changed everything, human. Ethan shook his head. No, we changed everything. She reached out and placed her hand on his chest. Then let us guard it together. The wind carried their words away into the night. Down in the camp, humans and aliens sat side by side, sharing food and laughter. The war that had once divided them was now only a story told by firelight. And as dawn approached, the first rays of light touched the valley where peace and love had finally found a home.